Welcome back everyone to the shop. I've been restoring some furniture that we got at an antique store, and I was needing to cut the end of a tenon. Of course, you know, the mortise is the female side, the male is the tenon. And I was trying to think, there's got to be an easy way to do this, because I didn't have the right size stock and all of that. And it dawned on me last month that Ken sent us something that when I put a picture of this on my Instagram page, many of you said was a mortise cutter. Some of you said that or a dowel or tenon cutter. Some of you said that it was a dowel cutter. So I thought, let's go into the Bible, the American Hand Tool Bible here, and see if we can find it. Is this something that we can use to finish this project? I've never used one before. I don't even know how to set it up. Let's see what we can do. Let's take a little closer look at this really interesting and specialized tool that Ken sent. It looks to be complete. It is very old. No question about it. It's tricky with this old stuff, because when we have no one to show us how to use these things and how to set them up, I mean, we're basically starting from zero. I mean, we do have the tools, but sometimes I wonder, am I missing something? You know, it's hard to know. When I went online to search for this tool, there's little to almost nothing. I mean, I saw maybe one or two images of it, but I saw nothing of anyone using one or how to use it. So what we have here, obviously, let's just use our logic. It's made to fit into a brace. You know, the old hand drill, like a drill bit. It's obviously got a stop right here, a depth gauge that we can set to stop, and that's what would tell us that this is not for cutting dowels, because, well, I guess it could be, but it would be a very short dowel. I mean, you could never cut anything over much more than 2 inches. So it makes me believe, and I did experiment a little bit with this just so I didn't waste your time, I was able to cut this with it, but it was very difficult to figure out how to set it up. But this is obviously a depth stop, so you could determine how deep you wanted your tenons to be. And then we have a rotating base we've got, you know, like 7/8, 1 inch holes are all of our common size for dowels or for our tenons. And then the last part here is, of course, all of the trim and the adjustment portions for the blade itself. Now, I took the blade off, and it was in reasonably good shape. Now, let me bring you in here a little closer. I'll show you what I did. And of course, harnessing the power of the electron microscope, we can see that I did put a nice edge on it. It appears it's an old blade. It's good. There's a good chance that it was the original blade. It was really cut at an angle. You know, you can tell that it had been hand sharpened. You know, maybe that was the way it's supposed to be. I mean, how do I know? All I knew was to get it as flat and as sharp as I normally would a chisel. So I used the workshop platter sharpener there, and of course flattened out the back, and then put a very fine edge on it, which seems to help. So that's kind of where we're at with the tool here. The next step, obviously, was to see if we could find it in the Dictionary of American Hand Tools. Hey, how you doing, Lou? Lou gave this to me years ago, and it's been an awesome resource. So what I found in here was a dowel turning machine. Now, do you see the similarities right there? Kind of. This would have been meant for making dowels. It had its own crank, so it's not going to be hooked to a brace. And then we had varying degrees. It looks like it's coming out this way. Yeah, square stock going in. Various degrees or sizes of stock that you could make a dowel. And you could make it as long as you wanted to, because it's just coming out the other end. Now, one thing that I did see online, what appeared to be, with this tool, you would have had something probably like this called a Dowel Pointer. Basically like a sharpener, so you could put a point on the end of your square stock that you're going to be using, right? Because you can't start this cutting with a round focus, you hateful thing. You can't start cutting a dowel if your stock won't fit into the hole right there, right? So you got to point that up. So I think that you would use something like that to put a point on it before you start it. Well, we can do that with the belt sander. And yes, this is similar, but really not the same thing at all, right? So then I got to looking over here, and I went to tenon, and I marked the wrong page here, didn't I? So I was looking for here we go, a tenon Tenon machine. And here on page 472 we have a tenon machine. Now this is showing us cutting a spoke, a tenon for a spoke on like a wagon wheel. There would be the center hub. You can see the square mortises, and they would have clamped this on there to have that uniform tenon to fit a spoke. So it's like this, but it's not this. But I think this kind of shows that we're on the right page. My greatest challenge to setting this up was to figuring out how the blade works and to getting the angle right. Now imagine a pencil sharpener. That's kind of what I was thinking there. So obviously we'll start with this. So we can, by loosening this screw here, we can turn these. Now this will be the center line of the thing when it's spinning. We can turn these to get the dowel size we want. You know, they're all marked here, 1 inch, 3/4, all that. So we're going to try to make ourselves a little 3/8 dowel, right? So we can start there and we can lock that down. Now when I received the tool, it was set up, and this is how it was set up. The blade was through here, and the fact that there's so many adjustment screws, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This here is controlling kind of the pushing it tight against the stop over here. This back one, the more you screw that down, the more it changes the angle of the blade up. We've got the left and right, and then we've got 2 here that main job looks like it's just to hold it, right? So when I was setting this up, what I found is I had to raise. Here's how it was. Let me show you how it was when I got it. It was sitting flush down in there, and it seemed a little weird. I couldn't get it to cut at all. And so I spent an hour on it or so by matching up this corner exactly right on the inside of that dowel there, and I would turn this set screw to hold that there, double check it, and then holding this up above the plane of this by maybe a 1/16 or so, I would adjust these down here, kind of driving it down a little bit, putting some tension on it, and holding this in place. Is this correct? I have no idea. Here's a little better view close up from the side. You can see how I've got that, you know, just imagine that pencil sharpener as that rotates around, that cutting and that corner being exactly inside the wall of that. Now if I loosen that back screw, I can diminish that angle slightly by turning this screw down, getting it closer. Do you see how we're adjusting it like that? I'm sure that these adjustments are critical, and what I wouldn't give for just 5 minutes of someone back in the day to show me how to set this up. But all we can do is just kind of do trial and error. So with it like that, let's see if that's going to be effective. Since we don't have a tool to put the point on the stock, we'll just use the belt sander. With the point on the stock, now of course, you know, we were able to get that thing started and cutting. You know, just for example, what's the practical use here? Let's say that we had a dowel that was a 1/2 inch and we wanted one that was 7/16. Could we remake that? Because making a perfectly round dowel by hand is outside my ability. It would be something that would be very tedious and take a long time to do. So a tenon, not so much, but just it would be a lot of work. That's why these tools probably exist. So if we're going to turn this, what is it, roughly 1/2 inch into a 7/16. If I take my brace here, even with my biggest brace, it barely fits wide open. It's not certainly not ideal. But we start turning. I can hear the cutting. Hopefully we're cutting here. Yeah, it's very critical because the tolerance is so tight of that sizing of the dowel that the tool has to be held very, very straight. I've got the stop set for probably an 1.5 inches, 1.25 or so. So we'll keep turning. I can see the chips coming off, so again, I don't know if this is the optimal setting for it, but it is working. And there we are, hard on the stop. And here you can see close up that indeed we did. We took a dowel and we sized it down by 1/16 of an inch right there from what we had. So that even, and it's actually pretty smooth. It looks a little bit nasty because it's got all the dirt and grime and stuff from on there, but that it seems to be pretty uniform and consistent. Interesting how it kind of cut off of one side right there. But that would be, I mean, just imagine building spokes for a wagon wheel. Once you were proficient with it and once you understood how to set it up, that would be a great time saver, wouldn't it, for cutting those tenons, those round tenons like that. Pretty interesting. And again, you can see here on this old stool that I'm restoring, it's highly likely, I'm just looking at this, I mean, this is a very, very old piece, no doubt handmade, that they used a tool similar, if not the exact same thing as we just played with there. You can see how that, they would have made that on the end real quickly, and then that would have fitted in here and made a very strong joint. And here, so strong and such good construction that we have a little table here that was probably built over 100 years ago that we're still using today, right? Where will IKEA furniture be then? Won't be around, will it? No, it won't. That's the difference between this old handmade stuff and new stuff. And just for fun, what I needed a little 3/4 inch tenon out of oak right there, and I used a piece of square stock. So I just went to the table saw and just ripped down a 1 inch by 1 inch piece, put a little chamfer on the end of it there with the belt sander, and then this is what I got when running it through the 3/4 inch tenon jig or dowel jig. Was a pretty usable little tenon. Well, that's probably about all the time we have for today. So thank you, Ken, for sending this. This is a very, very interesting tool and something I'm looking forward to learning more about. Hopefully there's someone out there, an old timer, that maybe has some experience with that. Upload that video for us so we can see. As that is, I've never seen one before, and it's not even in the book. So that attests to its rarity. So it's awfully quiet around here today. We woke up this morning and Jack, of course, is gone at summer camp. I took off, I took him and Jack and one of his best friends, they were going in camp together. I was about 4.5 hour drive or so. So I drove the boys in and got back late last night. And then my buddy's, or Jack's friend's dad's gonna bring them home. So we only have to go one way. But I was just noticing today how quiet it is around here not having him, and also mostly how much we take for granted how much work he does around here, especially watching the sweet loaf and making coffee and running errands and all that. You know, it's a good lesson for me. You can get to the point where you can easily get frustrated, especially I think fathers with their teen sons. And I have to constantly remind myself the teenage brain is not fully developed, right? When you tell them something, 50,000 times and they don't do it, I'm sure you can relate to that. It's like, how many times do I have to tell them? But then when they're gone, you realize all of the things that they do and all of the work that they contribute to the family that you never give them credit for. So I'm gonna have to make sure that I remember that. And Mrs. W always, I like how she says, or I think her mom said this, remember kids are people too. That they're not just beasts of burden, and they're not to be disrespected. You know, the thing that's so that really drives this point home was is it The Weight of Glory? One of C.S. Lewis's is one of his more obscure books. I think it was The Weight of Glory. He talks about maybe it was Mere Christianity. It's not important. You need to read Mere Christianity if you haven't already. But he's talking about a person deciding to becoming a Christian, right? And maybe, and himself in particular, coming from someone that was exceedingly, brilliant, exceedingly intelligent, and a professor, and around all these educated people, how you can, when you finally start going into the Christian churches, you have this idea in your mind, that you've been reading, you're thinking of sandals and togas, and the disciples and all these things. And when you get there to the actual church, you find something very different. You find people that are maybe not living up to the Christian standard. You find people that maybe are just not very hip, not very cool. Maybe they're wearing funny clothes. C.S. Lewis says, he talks about, sitting next to a guy he was so annoyed by because his shoes were squeaking. All these different things, and you can bring this elitism into this church and these expectations that are unrealistic, and then you'll find yourself being disappointed, right? And he cautions against that because he says, remember the lowliest person, the people that are often in this world that we look down upon, maybe we don't think they're up to our standard or at our station, or they have our physical attributes or our intellect, and we can be snobbish, right? Can we? Speaking to myself here. He says, remember that it's oftentimes in the scripture that God uses the least of people, the people that you would last expect to be an instrument of His will, is oftentimes what He does, and and that right there just proves what a sense of humor He has, right? Just to do the opposite of what people think, and I like that. But he cautions, be careful, because that person with the squeaky shoes, or that person that wears the funny clothes, or that person that you think is not up to your standard, very well may be one of my people, and very well may be sitting in judgment of men and angels in the final days. And so when you look upon these people, when you look upon these children, even though they're not fully developed and they're not your equal in many ways, remember that they have every right and there's every possibility, every chance that they will be sitting in judgment of you. So that's a frightful thing, right? So when you think that and when you consider that, it helps you to be more patient, more respectful towards things that you don't understand, and maybe you don't know all the facts. It just helps you to be. It just helps you to be a better man. It helps you to see the bigger picture, I think. So that's it. Yeah, maybe we'll need to sit down and talk about that a little bit more in one of our. We'll think about that. You may notice the audio is better. I'm rambling here now. I upgraded to finally we should have good audio. I finally quit messing around with haphazard stuff and budget stuff, and I got professional level lavalier mic. And this is the second video I've shot with it, and it sounds really good in my headphones when I'm editing. Let me know what you guys think, if it sounds better or not. But you can't really get any better. It's as good as it gets for just a one-man show. But I think that's going to solve a lot of those audio problems we've been having in the past. So that's it. Always trying to make better content for you guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click the thumbs up, and we'll see you guys on the next video.